In Shadowlands, you'll be range! Nah! Well, kill shot, arcane shot, and steady shot make it to the kit, so now people can shut up about their dislike of melee hunter? Or at least that's how it feels. That plus, you know, covenant abilities, some buffs to talents, and survival feels kinda the same. So let's hop in. This and many other specs you can catch us play on stream at twitch.tv/MarcelianOnline. We are live 5 days a week at somewhat flexible intervals to catch as many time zones as we can. Tune in so you can catch us yourself, play more specs and test them on Shadowlands, and maybe join in for a dungeon or raid on live. EU Horde. Now, on with the show. First off, the range abilities. Arcane Shot is baseline for all 3 specs. It costs 30 focus and deals more damage than Kill Command, but it requires a bow. Wait, what? Yeah. I have no idea what the fuck is going on. We touched on this topic in our Beast Mastery video, but for survival it's literally useless. Why? Is there a secret plan to this? Is this a hidden mechanic we need to unlock to be able to shoot arcane shots? Same with steady shot, which, get this, does not generate focus, even if you do equip a bow. Are you happy with your unpruning survivals? You asked for range and you got it. What more can you want? Jokes aside, you can only hope that there's a reason for all of this. Maybe Blizzard has a plan for survival. Maybe they are just part way towards giving the spec a mid-range feel with more options to shoot from afar. At least they fixed kill shot to not require a bow, and yeah, you have execute once again, and kill shot is actually pretty dope. I mean, it always was, but you know, it took a break from WoW for a few years and decided survivals need a leg up. I can imagine arcane shot and steady shot being made so they don't need a ranged weapon equipped, because it's clear survival is going to stay melee. As for kill shot, not much to say. You probably played with it in the past and it's not different in this iteration. Instant, doesn't cost focus, and has a 10-second cooldown. Eyes of the Beast has been brought back, yet it's still not implemented in the Shadowlands Alpha or Beta. But Scare Beast is, and Scare Beast is actually kinda good. Depending on how dungeons are tuned, and possibly raids as well, there are some beasts that are worth fearing to give your tank some breathing room, and it's pretty clear this will have really good uses in PvP. Same thing with Trank Shot. It being baseline is not only class fantasy specific, but frees up your pet choice, and choices are always better, or at least that's what communism taught us. Misdirection has been changed as well, where now it lasts for 30 seconds on your target, and when you start attacking, the effect starts to transfer threat for the next 8 seconds, then it falls off. This is essentially a quality of life improvement, so you can make the most out of the threat transferred to your tank and not have to either waste damage or seconds of its duration because the combat doesn't start when you are prepared. This is a good change. A grace period to this ability will give you more time to set up your rotation without being impacted by casting misdirection. And saving the best for last, Revive Pet is now on a 6-second cast to fall in line with the Warlock Pet summon duration. The change has made pet classes feel incredibly awkward when doing solo content, because if your pet dies, you can't just sit there for 6 seconds while everything attacks your first. But you'll have to. Pop a turtle maybe and revive your pet. That's what defensive cooldowns are for, dum-dum. I know I said best for last, but not everything is doom and gloom. Raptor Strike has had its base damage buffed from 70% attack power scaling to 100%. This is a very big increase for a basic rotational ability, and more buffs like this have been made mostly to talents as well. To fit in with the AoE cap, Carve now hits up to 5 enemies instead of all enemies in front of you. We discussed the AoE cap previously, and right now the way the dungeons are scaled, it doesn't look like you can make particularly big pulls anyway, so unless Mythic Plus scales stupidly to require us to pull more, the AoE cap should be okay-ish. Lastly, for reals this time, Hunter's Mark is baseline for survival. Aside the fact that it makes not much sense for a melee spec to have this ability, a 5% damage increase in single target for a spec that does a lot of single target damage is incredibly strong and incredibly dual and annoying to use. It takes up a GCD. Need I say more? No. This will be incredibly worth it to use, enough to make you feel like you are wasting damage by not pressing it, but it's hardly a rewarding button to press. The Kyrians of Bastion come with the Resonating Arrow Covenant ability. On a 1-minute cooldown, you fire an arrow on the ground that lights up the area and the mobs inside, letting you hit them without line of sight issues. Also, you have 30% extra crit chance against them. Proper positioning and crowd control will essentially transform this into a budget Blood of the Enemy. A massive crit chance boost, but that's about it. The line of sight is mostly likely not going to be an issue for a melee spec, although there could be creative ways to utilize it depending on how many Ajara-like encounters Blizz will have for you. It can definitely have uses in PvP, but I have a strange harpoon through a wall or pillar into falling through the texture feeling about this one. The Necrolords of Maldraxxus will offer you the Death Chakram. This is not like your normal Chakram talent, but close enough. You fire it at your target, deals modest damage and bounces to nearby enemies 7 times, each time dealing 15% more damage and generating 3 focus. It has a 45-second cooldown, which makes it pretty cool because it's a pretty cool ability overall. Survival suffers baseline from AoE issues, so this is a welcome addition to the AoE kit that was lacking. Pair it up with the actual Chakram's talent and you are range. Almost. Not really. You are not range. Stop being a child. And speaking of AoE issues, Wild Spirits comes from the Night Fae Covenant of Ardenweald. This is a pretty flashy ability actually, it's about it. You fire an AoE that marks all targets in it, giving you 5% extra damage to them. When you hit them with direct damaging abilities, aka not dots, they flare up and are hit by a wild spirit or simply a decent chunk of damage. The damage potential of this one can be pretty big if your AoE abilities wouldn't have been capped in AoE. The ability itself isn't AoE capped, but does have a 2-minute cooldown and lasts for 15 seconds. This essentially means it's a 2-minute AoE burst ability that most likely wants you to bomb and carve and... well, that's about all your baseline AoE abilities. So unless stuff like Hydra's Bite or Chakrams become baseline or viable, your ability to exploit wild spirits or even to get a decent output out of it will be extremely limited. Lastly, we take a break from AoE to focus on what really matters. Single target! The Venthyr of Revendreth will offer you the might of Flayed Shot, because Blizzard really likes to remind you could be ranged, but you aren't really ranged. Flayed Shot fires a shot from melee because you are not ranged, but has a range of fire, of course. It applies a decent dot on the target that has a 15% chance per tick to activate your kill shot regardless of the target's HP or the skill's cooldown. This is particularly neat and very strong in single target boss fights. Supposedly. Flayed Shot has a measly 30-second cooldown, lasts for 20 seconds and costs 10 focus. Very cheap with a very high uptime and potentially many kill shot procs over the course of a 5-minute boss fight. This is in stark contrast with the other abilities and kind of underlines the issue with the Covenants, where the performance of each ability is so different from the others that it will be incredibly difficult to have them balanced. But we will keep our Covenant restriction rants for another video. Talent. As you heard before, a bunch of talents have had their base power scaling buffed to net overall more damage. Hydra's Bite was, and probably still is, a situational pick on live, and in Shadowlands it will increase the dot damage of Serpent Sting by 20% up from 10%. Outside a specific Azurite build, Hydra's Bite was hardly better than Guerrilla Tactics, so it's good to see a buff to it. Same with Butchery. From a 80% attack power modifier, it got buffed to 88% attack power. This change, together with Hydra's Bite change, is a good step in the right direction, where we see buffs to underused options instead of a nerf to the overused one. It's not like Survival was particularly amazing in AoE scenarios anyway. Steel Trap has also received a buff from 120% attack power modifier to its bleed to a 200% increase. Even with this, it's unlikely this will see PvE play since it's still a lot less damage than Murder of Crows, which is already behind Bloodseeker, which may be a clue as to how much this row needs attention. Although this could be a good change for PvP with a strong emphasis on good. Even PvP, which wants CC coupled with dot pressure, Bloodseeker was way stronger, so only numbers can actually tell in the end. The direction is good, but maybe the buff is not sufficient. One of the bigger buffs, although again unclear if sufficient, came to Mongoose Bite, the row at least. Specifically to Tip of the Spear. At this point, this talent row has been dead for years, in that Mongoose would be the default only valid choice for all content. Tip of the Spear has been buffed to offer a 25% damage buff to the next Raptor Strike, stacked 3 times, up from 20%. The buff is decent and can culminate in very big Raptor Strikes, especially with the baseline buff to Raptor Strike. Flanking Strike has been addressed as well with a simple 10-second cooldown reduction in its cooldown down to 30 seconds from 40. This essentially translates into 1 extra flanking strike after every 3rd cast in terms of uptime. Outside of that, the talent itself is an awkward choice on this row and doesn't really feel like it fits. The other 2 focus on increasing the damage of your spenders, while this one gives you a hard-hitting generator. I'm not sure what this talent row is supposed to accomplish aside from the simple-minded give more damage goal. Lastly, you have Chakrams, costing 15 focus instead of 30. The damage has not been changed, and I never thought its cost was what was holding the ability back. And a simple change in cost doesn't make this competitive with the other 2 options on the row, at first glance anyway. The skill is fun to use, and a focus cost reduction makes sense for a focus-starved spec as survival. However, until we get add-ons and sims and logs, it's hard to tell how good this skill is. With the same argument as before, the last talent row feels a little bit out of place. Birds of Prey works towards giving you massive coordinated windows on prolonged boss fights for a larger burst window, while Fire Infusion alters the rotation and the bombs entirely to have a very different interactive and fun function with the rotation. Chakrams fires a projectile that bounces back and deals damage. Hunter's Mark should be off the GCD. Please, Blizzard. I get the fantasy of the spell for hunters, and if we really have to have it baseline, make it off the GCD. It's incredibly painful to have to cast it if you have to switch targets, and you will in raids, and I'm not even gonna talk about dungeons. And this culminates into a bigger problem. My personal issue with survival is that baseline, it's a pretty engaging spec. You have to maintain Serpent Sting, Wildfire Bombs. Now, Hunter's Mark don't cap on focus, don't waste focus, each with their respective abilities to cast that are either on cooldown or have a stacking buff to their damage, and all of this is part of the baseline rotation. Depending on what talent you pick, you will either have 1 extra proc or charge or cooldown, or another cooldown to react to, cast or maintain. All of these outside your actual cooldowns, which can also change your priority based on a few conditions. It's a really fun spec to play outside the low damage it was outputting in BFA compared to the amount of effort you had to put in. Not sure if survival needs more buttons to manage and calculate how important they are in your rotation, since there are plenty of moments when you have 2 to 4 abilities ready to cast and you need to know which one is the more important one. That's the charm of the spec, but you are no way near enough rewarded for making the right decision. In a world with Havoc Demon Hunters that can literally bind their entire keyboard to Blade Dance and I-Beam and still do more damage than survival, it feels like Blizzard is not taking the spec seriously when it comes to its design and points towards them not actually playing it in any content remotely difficult. This has been a bit ranty, but the design discrepancy between specs is painfully obvious, and you and I might really want to be rewarded for putting in more time and effort into learning and operating a complex spec. The beta will be out by the time this video goes live, so more people will test the spec. Any changes that come out, we will do our best to put them in a pinned comment down below the video. But you should stay up to date with the Trushal Lodge Discord community, where hunter information is going left and right from top players around the world. And we would like to give a special thank you to the patrons for continuously supporting our channel. We really appreciate it. Know that all of your effort goes into upgrading the studio and upgrading the quality of the videos entirely, and working towards making the channel bigger, both in terms of the type of videos that we can do. So thank you very much. And if you are interested in supporting the channel a little bit more, it's definitely not requested, but highly appreciated. You can check the link to the Patreon down below, where you will find maybe more goodies that you can like. Maybe some of our merch designed by Marcelian, hand drawn to like some really cool graffiti, man. Like goddamn shit, it's pretty nice. Thank you for watching the video. We'll see you in the next one.